So a common practice in animation is to create a mesh puppet in which you can sort of manipulate and move around, and I wanted to show a little bit about it, what the process for creating that is. And so there will be two steps, one of which is we want to cut out our Godzilla here, and then the second one will be to actually animate it. And so for the cutting out portion, we'll predominantly be using the object selection tool, which is really efficient. You just grab it and then throw the whole thing that you want in a rectangle for you, and it'll run for a moment and then it'll cut it out. And from there, as you'll see, it sort of tends to choose especially concaved portions of an area, and sometimes areas with low contrast. So what you can do is hold down shift and then grab areas that it missed out on, and it'll do a pretty good job of doing this. And you can go back and forth between shift and option and fine tune this in, and just try and grab all those little concave areas, and wrangle them back into the right forms. And then with this one, you have a little bit of overlap, which tends to be another issue. So this is doing a pretty good job. It's pretty close at this point, so I may even just jump ahead because I have sort of a finished version here. But this is certainly good enough for what we're doing here. And so from there, I want to just hit select and mask, and it'll do a pretty darn good job of cutting it out. And some of this extra stuff, if you want to, you can click on it to reveal it, or you can go up here, and I think you can do the refine edge tool, and that'll help sort of repaint these edges a little bit. Or you can go back into your object select systems. But once you have that all masked out, you're just going to want to go down here and say new layer, or new layer with layer mask. I'm going to go with new layer for now, because what I'm going to do is build up 5 different layers of this. One base layer, one this cutout, which will be animated, and then there will be some other areas where, like, we need to animate this arm separately because it needs to move in front of the body. So not only do we need to mask that out and cut it out, we then have to paint that back over with content-aware fill. So right now we have our mask and our background. And from here, I just want to do effectively the same thing, but just replace it with content-aware fill. So I'm going to just do this really quickly, and this has to be even less precise, because it's going to be doing a pretty good job of sort of replacing it. So that's good enough, and you can go up to edit and content-aware fill. And this is going to give you this new fresh cutout. You can also use the lasso tool. You can also use the spot healing brush. All of them do a pretty decent job. And we can play it back, and it gives us a pretty accurate fill. It's definitely a little bit weird in here, but for our purposes today, it should be fine, because basically we're going to have our Godzilla sitting over top of this stuff and then swaying back and forth and moving a little bit more there. So now that we have those two, one last thing that we're going to want to do is just cut out the arm, and we can once again use the same object where you can hit Command D to deselect if you are still selected, and then you can just grab the arm there and sort of fill it in as best as you can. This one is pretty important to make sure that it's sort of the arm and shoulder and not the spines back here. But again, it's all pretty darn quick. And this is leftover from the previous one because I was doing a very quick job. If you make sure that you grab all the edges, that won't show up. And so from that point, all you have to do is just hit, once you have your arm masked out, and then you reset the arm in basically the same way that you did with the background, and then you content aware fill, return it. So if we go edit, content aware fill, it'll give somewhat of a natural look to the thing, and since it'll be moving back and forth, this won't show up, the little outlines here won't show up nearly as well. So you really can be quite quick with this. And so I'll do one last one and show you what the layer hierarchy will eventually look like. And so here's my arm, and I'll just say select and mask and new layer, and there we go. So now once we have these all back, and I'll put that up top, we have this somewhat ridiculous subset. There's the missing arm, and there's the arm, and then under there is the full Godzilla with the missing background, and then there's the background, and then there's the full background. And so when we layer them all off, it'll be slowly revealing the different portions of it. And from there, you can just save it as a Photoshop file, because that's what will be brought into After Effects.